Hello, welcome to Questions for Atheists. My name is Scott, and today we will be answering the question, where do atheists get their morals? Now, before we begin, there's actually something I want to address, and might be able to hear that my voice is a little different. That's because I'm still getting over being sick. I was sick for about a week and a half and unable to speak. So what exactly does that mean? I just started making a video series about atheism, and suddenly I'm stricken with sickness. So clearly this means that I've upset some kind of god or goddess or divine being out there who doesn't like my message, right? Well, the problem with that is that I know that some people around me were sick before I even started this. Some people in my household were sick at the same time. Some people were sick before me, some people were sick after me, so as far as I can tell, it seems to be a coincidence. But, for the sake of argument, let's say that there is a divine being out there that I have pissed off, and that divine being decided that they were going to strike me down with sickness and take away my voice as punishment for what I was saying. So, if that's the case, what exactly can we learn from that? Well, that's really about it. We just know that this divine being of some kind has some power over sickness and doesn't like what I was saying. So I guess I'm sorry, Apollo. I am sorry that I upset you. Please don't strike me with your arrows of pestilence anymore. And if you disagree with my assessment that clearly it must have been Apollo who was the one who was striking me with pestilence, how are we going to resolve this issue then? Because there's no way for us to tell which divine being it was that was making me sick. So to make this a little clearer, let's use a courtroom analogy. Let's say that someone is being charged with murder, and the prosecutor comes forward in the case and says, okay, so the victim was found dead in their apartment, and in the apartment we found fingerprints, and the defendant has fingerprints. Therefore, the defendant is guilty. Now, hopefully we can all agree that this kind of argument is a terrible one, because the evidence presented can point to anyone, and if it can point to anyone, then it inherently points to no one. And so, there very may well be a deity who was angry at me and made me sick, but just the fact that I got sick doesn't actually point to any one specific deity. Alright, but enough about that. If you feel like you want to point out some more evidence that maybe I missed about why it was a specific deity, please feel free to let me know. But for now, let's keep going on with our question, where do atheists get their morals? So, like I said before, I am just one guy on the internet, so I can't speak for all atheists. And I have known some who have basically said, you know, I gave up on my religion, but I actually like the moral teachings, so I'm just going to keep the moral teachings as is. So some atheists get their morals from a religion. But to address this question, I'm actually going to use myself as the example, and I'm going to explain how I get and establish my morals when I don't have some other kind of external, supreme, divine being to dictate them for me. So, it's actually pretty easy. We basically just start with a couple of assumptions. We start with the assumption that generally being alive is better than being dead. Generally being healthy is better than being sick. Generally experiencing pleasure is better than suffering. So after we do this, we say, okay, this is generally how I want my life to be. I want to be alive and healthy and happy. Then we ask some other people what they think. Do they want the same thing? And if we have a consensus, then we can start to establish rules so we can try and promote all of the things that we want and minimize all the things that we don't. And so from this we can see things like, okay, it's generally better to be alive than dead. If you kill someone, they are no longer alive, so that is taking away something that they want. So killing is bad because I would like to be alive and I don't want someone to kill me. And of course, this isn't always the case because real life isn't always black and white. Sometimes killing one person can actually have more benefits, like self-defense to protect yourself or your loved ones. Perhaps arguments for capital punishment, where killing one person could possibly save more lives. or euthanasia. One person could possibly, their quality of life could drop so drastically that perhaps death would be preferable to life. And all of this is the gray area where perhaps this rule is not steadfast and needs to be bent and argued. But despite these gray areas, we can still establish general rules to follow and general things that we are going to prohibit. And notice that I say that these rules are prohibiting things and not allowing things. We can start either by allowing everything and then narrowing down those things that we want to prohibit, or we can start by prohibiting everything and then allowing only those things which we want. And perhaps you might argue for the other method, but my worry is that if we only allow those things which we specifically dictate, perhaps there are other things that we don't think of that are perfectly allowable, which just by the virtue of our system are being prohibited for no reason. So this is why I start with allow everything, and then we establish moral rules to prohibit some things. Those things that we prohibit are considered immoral. There are certain things which we might consider moral, which are good but not necessary, and everything else is amoral, having no moral judgment attached to it. So to give some examples of each of these things, let's start with murder is immoral. We can probably skip the exact definition of murder because most people are going to agree that murdering someone is a bad thing. So then let's go to something moral. Let's say rescuing someone from a burning building. That's a good thing. You're helping somebody, but it's not a necessity. If you are a bystander by a burning building and you don't run in to save someone, you're not doing a bad thing. If you do, then arguably you are helping. You might just be endangering yourself and causing more problems, but for the sake of argument, let's say that you are helping somebody and this is a good thing, but it's not absolutely necessary that everyone attempt this when possible. And for an example of an amoral thing that has no moral judgment attached to it, let's say when you walk out of the front door in the morning, if you take a step with your left foot instead of your right foot, there's nothing moral about that at all. There's nothing bad, nothing good. There's no inherent judgment attached to that. So we can see that through the system we can establish good rules, but that's only part of it, because we have to examine how we get to these good rules. Because let's say, for example, that my method for determining morality is every time I flip a coin, and perhaps every time I flip that coin I just by chance get the right decision. I have arrived at a good set of moral rules, but my method was very flawed. So how can we evaluate our system at all to see if it is a reliable method for determining morality, especially when it can be so vague and general? Basically, the only way we can really do this is to test it, see if the results promote those things that we want, like life and health and pleasure. And we can also periodically reevaluate it, see if we get the same answers when we start from the same premise. If you use the coin flip example, you're probably not going to arrive at the same answers every time, and that's going to be one indicator that your method is unreliable. But with this system, you generally end up at the same place. There's still those gray areas, but just about everything will stay the same every time that you start and from those points and work towards your general rules. So yeah, that's about it. You can start with a couple of assumptions and work from there to establish a good moral system, and you can even periodically check it to make sure that this is still promoting those things that you want out of your moral system. So there are still a couple of things that I can say, like comparing this method of attaining morality to some other ones, but I'm going to save that for the further questions because it's probably going to come up again there, and I will be able to go into more depth in that topic in the further questions. So, with that said, if you have any questions about morality and atheism or any other topic, feel free to leave a comment below or send it to questionsforatheists@gmail.com. And if you have questions but don't want me to just make a video and put it up on the internet for everyone to see, and you actually want to have a dialogue with me directly, let me know that too. Send me an email and I will email you back and we can have a discussion that way. You can keep it private if you wish, or we can go into more depth and talk directly. So, yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Keep your questions coming, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.